Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Pablo Langa. I'm the founder and managing partner at EDT&Partners. And it's a pleasure for me to host the webinar today around generative AI in education. I'm very excited to be the host today and to be joined by three different initiatives and phenomenal individuals that started with generative AI and ChatGPT before it was a big trend. So very excited about that. Before we move on, actually, I also wanted to make sure I congratulate everyone on International Women's Day. A little bit of logistics as well. The session will be recorded and we will be sharing all the materials with you all and hoping that you will get to join the conversation through the different streams that we have available. So far, almost like 1,000 people registered for the webinar. So thanks so much for the interest. In terms of agenda for today, we'll start with a very brief introductions and housekeeping, and then we'll give the opportunity for these three different individuals and initiatives to share a little bit about their journey with AI and generative AI, and also a little bit about themselves. Then we'll open up for a panel, and we'll wrap up with some hopefully Q&A coming from all of you. So excited to start the conversation. In case you didn't know about EDT&Partners, we are a global consulting firm dedicated to the business of education. We work in three major verticals: strategy and growth, helping edtechs, universities, and schools grow into the markets; product and technology, and that's the main part of the conversation today; and also M&A. We wanted to address, before I open up to the other participants, the elephant in the room. We were asked by a few people, like, hey, why we only have product people and companies in the conversation today? Where are the educators? Where are the faculty? We acknowledge these, and it's impossible to have everyone in the same room, especially in 1 hour of time. So we'll make sure the next webinar in the next 5 to 6 weeks will bring policymakers and practitioners, faculty and teachers from different parts of the world to discuss around ChatGPT and AI from their perspective. Without further ado, I'm excited to introduce the three speakers, starting with Ben Whately, co-founder and CSO at Memrise. Ben is an entrepreneur, studied neuroscience at Oxford, and has a deep passion for learning languages by doing. So Ben, I think you're muted, but great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Excellent. Also, we have Carla Susagna with an educational psychology background, joining from my beloved Spain as the head of sales at Koanly. So Carla, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent. And last but not least, Bassel, founder at eFlow, initiative based at UAE. So I didn't mention, we wanted to have a little bit of diversity from location. So Memrise, represented by Ben, coming from the UK, Carla from Spain, and Bassel representing the UAE and the Middle East. I think joining from Lebanon today. And Bassel, computer scientist with a true passion for education. This is his second startup in the space. Phenomenal vision and passion for technology and AI from early ages. So I'm really excited to hear what he has to say and then demonstrate with his solution deploying AI. So without any further ado, I promise I do the intro in 2 minutes. I took 4. So I'll hand it over to Ben so he can explain a little bit more about himself and about Memrise. Thanks, Ben.
Amazing. Thanks, Pablo. So yeah, I mean, it's true what Pablo says. I have a passion for learning through doing, and I think that gets to the heart of a lot of how I think about learning. And a lot of that is rooted in that early experience I had studying neural networks 20 years ago at Oxford. And one just little anecdote before I get into the style of Memrise here is that, which I think is kind of relevant to how I think about large language models as well. So and their role in education. So my tutor was a neuroscience professor, and I was working together with him on my sort of final piece, looking for final exams, looking at evolving neural networks and how we're going to manage that. And yeah, he was a professor, he'd written dozens of papers and many books on neuroscience. But as we were talking about this, how to structure this particular problem, what he was telling me didn't make sense. And it just didn't check out with how I understood it. And so I went away, did more research, thought about it some more, came back with different ideas. Now, I never persuaded him of my point of view, but I questioned it. And out of that questioning came a lot of new ideas about how humans learn and how we should be training language models to learn, which is a lot based on learning through doing. And I took that idea, and that is actually what led me then directly a few years later to founding Memrise. These ideas of how human brains learn through doing stuff. And what I think is interesting, you know, we've grown Memrise. Well, I can talk more about Memrise later, but whether the professor was actually right or whether he was teaching me the truth didn't actually turn out to be the important point in that educational experience for me. What turned out to be important was the human discourse between us, where I could have a discussion about it, find where things didn't work, and then go and research them more. And that's core to how I think about LLMs in education. So I want you to hold that in mind as we're talking about this, that it is like, where does education change as access to human-like conversation becomes ubiquitous, rather than just looking at whether LLMs are always talking the truth, whatever that elusive concept may mean. So here we've got a little bit of background on Memrise. I'll pause for a moment there, but switching to this slide, we've got a bit of background on Memrise, which is crucial to understanding how we're using LLMs at the moment and what we built with them. So language learning essentially is a very simple process. There are two things that you absolutely need to do, and one thing that can be really helpful to reduce stress and boost confidence. So the two things you absolutely have to do are number 2 and number 3 on this list. You absolutely have to try to understand language that's just above your current level. That process of your mind making sense of target language is you learning the language. You also have to overcome your fear of speaking and try and express yourself in the language. It can then be helpful to explicitly learn words and phrases and have grammar explained. That can make you go faster. But points 2 and 3 are the sufficient. Point 1 tends to be what we think of as language lessons, but it's not actually necessary and it's not actually sufficient. The biggest barriers to language acquisition are those second 2. Access to enough content that's just above your current level, and enough opportunities to practice talking in situations that don't make you feel stupid. The third on this list, so communicate, is especially difficult. So human children get this from their parents. Parents can't help talking in kind of simplified language to small kids. And that's hugely important. It helps humans a lot to make progress. But if you aren't a kid, how do you do it? And kind of the classic way is to get a love interest who speaks the language. It's a kind of cliche for a reason. You need a big incentive to be very patient with the tedious, simple level of chat of a language learner. Or you can pay and go and get a tutor. But for most people in the world, those aren't viable options. People wanting to learn English, most of the people across the world wanting to learn English can't afford to pay English teachers the prices that the English teachers command, and they don't have access to people who may become their potential love interests. Large language models and their ability to have human-like language represent a complete step change in what is possible, because now you can practice language for real. So next slide, if we just look at how we've done that. And in fact, if we can play the video on the next slide. Watch this for a moment. You're choosing a conversation here. Huge range of things you can choose from. Each mission has a kind of description of what you have to try and achieve. The bot then sends you messages. It can speak them out loud, and you can then talk back. If you don't understand it, you can translate it, and then in this case in Spanish, so you can speak into it in Spanish. It understands what you're saying. So if you're talking about irrelevant things, it can still reply to you. It corrects you when you make a mistake. And you can also, if you don't know how to talk, you can reply in English and translate it. So what this is doing is giving not only the opportunity to have a fluent and normal conversation in spoken language, where you can say anything you like, but it's also giving you suggested responses. It's correcting your grammar. It's allowing you to translate when you don't understand, things that actually aren't present in the overwhelming majority of real human-to-human interactions when you're learning a language. So not only does this actually replicate the positive parts of having a conversation with a human, it actually gives you more than you get from a human, because it gives you all of this framework around the side, which would be great if you could get from a human, but isn't generally available. So the key takeaway here is that I think, back to the point I made at the beginning, that language learning is this example of where the human-like discourse is the really, really important thing in the educational experience. Being able to practice having a conversation, whether or not the conversation is true, and in these situations that we set up, it doesn't really matter if if the LLM is coming up with something that is objectively true. You're going through the process of a conversation. That's the important part. And I think there are actually a huge number of moments in education where the discourse, the fact of discourse with a seemingly intelligent being, is actually more important than just the mere imparting of information. And actually, I'll just finish with a final piece of data, which is kind of interesting for us to see. So there are a whole load of different conversation types that you can have, or situations you can have a conversation in there. The most popular ones are telling someone you love them without saying I love you, and breaking the ice with a stranger. So people are doing this in order to have human conversations, not just to sit in that artificial intelligence world. Sorry, I've gone way over time, but I'll stop there. Apologies for that.
No worries, Ben. It was worthwhile. Thanks for that. And indeed, I think the ceiling that you're breaking with. I mean, you didn't mention, but you've been flirting with AI for many years, up until kind of last year with recent developments that kind of getting into large language models kind of makes this breakthrough an opportunity. We'll talk a little bit more later about kind of the opportunities for
we
inclusivity.
Built multiple language bots before LLMs, but this is just such a step change difference. Yeah.
I bet. So looking forward to hearing more about that. Now over to Carla with another use case. In this case, more around content creation and potential self-service experiences. And again, these are initiatives that have been working with AI, generative AI, and large models for many months, way before it was popular for everyone. So lots to learn from them. Carla, over to you.
Thank you, Pablo. I will try to do it short and sweet. Koanly has created a unique solution for the global EdTech challenges in order to help teachers and students. Using your own content, Koanly generates learning activities and resources, and it does it automatically through the AI, and it does it in multilingual form. In addition, Koanly can be used as a private teacher, so it can support the students by asking them questions or explaining them the different topics in an easier way, so the students with different learning skills can understand them. Now, as you will see in the video, you will see how Koanly works and how it does it. As you can see, before it took us about 3 months to do the whole questions. Now, in less than 3 months, we can do more than 10 times what we used to do. It can be used for everybody. And of course, it cuts down all the repetitive tasks that we don't really like. So it gives you more space to do other things that we consider more important, as being closer to the students, for example. And as you could see, Koanly helps you to increase your content creation. And through the webinar, all of you will be able to know more about Koanly and how this tool can impact the education system.
Thanks so much, Carla. That was short and sweet, appreciated, and super impressive. I think a couple of questions are coming up around, what does this mean for the traditional content creator and those, individuals that were working in that specific field? But we'll kind of pose those questions in just a second after Bassel does his introduction. Thanks for that. And I think now over to Bassel, talking about, in this case, how with eFlow they've built the ability to create micro-learning experiences through kind of basically, the typical social media that we'll be using in everyday matter. So I think excited for Bassel to show us what they can do. I think some of you that actually registered to this webinar using cell phone numbers already got a snippet of what eFlow does. But Bassel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pablo, for having me. Just a quick intro about myself. So I'm a computer engineer. I've been in the edtech industry for the last 6 years, and I consider myself passionate or curious about solving the problems when it comes to online learning. I tried a lot of technologies, different approaches of learning to solve the problem that we have with education, as I used to have some problems when it comes to education. So this is why I'm here, and this is why we created eFlow. So now we're talking about ChatGPT, generative AI. Before we had a lot of technological advancements out there, but the online learning approaches and we have a lot of online learning approaches and platforms, but recent statistics show that online learning is still broken. And this is based on the recent statistics that we have. So it's failing to adapt to our busy schedule and lifestyle. So this is the reason why we created eFlow. So what it does is it enables learners to learn through AI-powered conversations from where they already are on instant messaging and communication apps. So these conversations are personalized and adapt to the learners' targets, goals, and even to their busy schedule. So to learn, learners don't have to download any app. So all they have to do is chat with our AI-powered tutor on their preferred platform. If it's WhatsApp, if it's Instagram, if it's MS Teams, or if it's even Slack. They can learn about different topics from leadership skills to financial literacy to even generative AI. Next slide, please. So actually here we have a QR code that you can scan, and you can directly talk with the bot on WhatsApp and get a demo course on generative AI. So you have 1, 2, 3. Next slide. I hope you scanned it. So when it comes to generative AI, it's the core of our platform, and we've been using it for the past 2 years before ChatGPT was cool. And it is the core of our learning approach. So if generative AI is not there, we won't be able to create this platform. So when it comes to generative AI, it helps us with 3 different aspects. So 1, it helps us with content flow creation. 2, it enables us for a more personalized experience and even personalized assessments for learners as they're going through the conversation. And it helps us to provide personalized feedback for learners as they are chatting with the AI tutor. So now I'm going to play a short video. It's going to show the core features of eFlow's platform, from the authoring tools to content delivery and even analytics. So here you can see the main 3 steps that we have. So 1, you can create guided conversations. So it's kind of powered by AI, and then you have to put a guide. Second, you can see here there's an example of how it's running on WhatsApp. So this is an actual conversation. And in this conversation, you can see the different responses for the learner. So here it's asking a question about if they know what generative AI is. It provides a personalized feedback based on that. The conversation is not only text, it can include also different media and even assessments, as you can see in the screen now. So this is an example on WhatsApp, but this also works on MS Teams, for example, on Slack, on different platforms. So this is an example on MS Teams. So, and lastly, as educators, we understand that we need to know the performance of the learners, analyze how learning is. So we have fully fledged analytics and performance measuring on the platform. Thank you.
Brilliant. I'm proud of the four of us. We're managing to be on track after the introductions and the first overview. So thanks the three of you.
Thanks for making up my failures.
No, come on, that's fine, Ben. And I'm excited about this second part of the conversation, a little bit more open, but of course we couldn't get into a panel discussion about ChatGPT and not ask ChatGPT about its opinion. So for those intrigued, we did ask, you can see the prompt for ChatGPT helps in terms of framing some of the questions. I guarantee that what you're about to hear is genuine. We didn't copy any of these questions, but I can also tell you that they were pretty spot on, at least for have a general guidance on what to ask for this type of audience and considering the type of speakers. But now kind of moving into an open conversation, and please, the three of you, feel free to answer in whatever order you like. Very different kind of solutions leveraging AI, and obviously, there is a need for speed in terms of bringing innovation to this space. Can I ask you what's next, right? What's your most immediate next step with AI, considering a new API was just announced by OpenAI very recently. What do you have ready to be released that you can share with the audience and with us in the next couple of months? Anyone?
Yeah, I'm going. Actually, our next milestone is exactly the integration of Koanly in the main open LMS. So our students and the educational institutions use just one login for all their products, so they don't have to go to each platform to study or whatever, so they can have it all in one.
For us, Pablo, when it comes to the milestones that we have, so first of all, we're collecting data from different learners and responses. This is where we fine-tune the model and optimize the model. But specifically, we're also working on our intermediate model that is factually checking the information that is being sent to the learners. So we do have a model right now, but we're enhancing it to do that. Because when it comes to education, you can't just throw out any answer. You have to make sure that this is factually correct. So this is currently our main focus right now.
Yeah, so for us, well, we started building this, as Pablo said, long before ChatGPT came out. So we were building on GPT-3 and did a bunch of very specific programming we needed to do in order to make it work with GPT-3. Now that the ChatGPT API has come out, we're switching straight over to that. It's already getting us better results, just more creative responses. But I guess the other thing is when you go sort of below the hood. So when you come to the Memrise, we call it the Membot. When you're talking to the Membot, and by the way, I noticed Sarah B asked, is it voice input? Yes, it's voice input as well. So voice input, output, as well as text, you can choose. There is the user experience where you're talking to this bot, but that's not actually the only place where we're using ChatGPT and GPT-3 within this. So there are other things we need to set up. When you're having a conversation in the Membot, there are completion targets. So we want to say, you've got to persuade this waiter to give you a 20% discount on the food. And it won't just give it to you because you ask, you've got to persuade it. So we first of all need to get the bot to behave in a way where it won't just give in straight away. But also we need to recognize when you have achieved that result. In the olden days, we'd have done that with a string match where it's like, has the bot said this? But of course now we're looking to do this through trying to read the sense in what the bot is expressing on where the conversation has got to. And so you can do that just by feeding the conversation into GPT-3, into ChatGPT, and asking it to make a judgment. But actually you can make it a lot better by giving it specific examples, fine-tuning it, asking it to check its own judgments, and also to break it down. So rather than just saying, has this been reached? You can ask it to say, make the case that this has been reached, make the case that this goal hasn't been reached. Now make a judgment on which of those is true. And then it does very much better. So if you break it down into steps, so we've also got a bunch of improvements that are kind of under the hood there around the way that we judge completion of a particular mission, we call them. And then finally, we also get ChatGPT to generate new missions. And so we need to, what the situation you're in, what the character of the bot is, what you're trying to achieve, and trying to get it to generate really good missions that have a good tension, they're kind of fun to play. That is such a big part of making this an enjoyable user interface, user experience, which is kind of crucial to people doing it. So we've got a whole load of improvements on that rolling out, all empowered by this move to ChatGPT API and the reduction in cost that comes with that.
Fantastic. Thanks to the three of you. And there is an immediate, probably short question to all of you, and especially those that are either connecting to us today or seeing this recording later on. How long did it take you from, hey, let's implement ChatGPT for this very specific use case to actually have it in production? Because I think this could be a good reference for a lot of organizations to realize the amount or complexity to get this in a tested manner in front of customers. And maybe Ben, we'll start with you with a short answer there.
So when we were starting building with GPT-3, not ChatGPT, getting a really simple version of it up didn't take us very long. Took us a couple of weeks to have something kind of working. Getting it working well was a lot of content job, and how you create tension in the conversation, and then how you get that success, the goal complete criteria judgment really good. That took a couple of months. Though honestly, if ChatGPT had been out when we started doing this, it would have been very much shorter. So I think the cycle times come down dramatically, and I think what you can achieve with these has gone so far, so fast. The time has come right down.
Yeah, Carla, similar experience for you. Oh, sorry, Bassel, if you want to jump in.
Go.
Sorry, ladies first. Go ahead.
Actually,
Carla,
we before the launching of OpenAI, we did train our existing model, and it took us a long time. And then having tried both systems, OpenAI allows us to cut down our tests from weeks to hours. And then in addition, in March, OpenAI announced the release of the API, so that will make it quicker. So it was a tough time, but now it looks like it's pretty much easier if you have an agile product that can help.
Pablo, for us, when it comes, so when it comes to the platform, so we created the platform knowing that GPT-3 was out there 2 years ago, and we built it in a way that we want to interact with this AI model to have this conversation. So the structure that was put was easy to add, like GPT-3 or this model. So when it comes to integrating the model, it's something simple if you have the structure for that. But as Ben mentioned, you have to do a lot of fine-tuning, prompt engineering. Like you have to do a lot of stuff to optimize it for your use case. And this is the most time-consuming thing. It's not just integrating the API. Integrating the API can be done by any developer. It's making it work for your use case in the approach that you need.
I think just to add on that, Bassel, actually the longest delay when I think about it, once we really got going, it just took a couple of weeks to get it out there. The big delay was actually 9-10 months, maybe even a year between when we said, this is a tool that we've got to use, it can do something incredible, to actually getting the project moving. And the problem with it was that it requires such an oversight of an understanding of how AI models work and an understanding of how product works, an ability to write a back end that can speak between the two, and an understanding of how to turn that into a front end
experience,
application. But doing that in a way where none of the bits are set. So normally you've got your front-end developer who knows how to do his bit or her bit. You've got your back-end developer who knows how to do her bit, but it needed someone who had that oversight. So we have my co-founder, Greg, came in who has exactly that experience, and Greg and I worked on it together. We've then got a product manager, Luis, who's got a PhD in machine learning. He's absolutely spans that understanding of the product side and really understands that. And I think that it really plays into finding these people who straddle those skill sets of understanding the development, but at the same time understanding the user experience, and really finding that. Also, now our tech lead on it, Francis, as well, has got that kind of full stack understanding. And I think you do at this point need that kind of a person to really get purchase on what's possible.
Interesting, Ben, you touched on profiles, and this was one of the questions I wanted to touch on. I thought the edtech or education sentence of the last 3 decades was lifelong learning. I think, one of my hairs was falling every time I would hear the sentence. But I think now, and that's why I'm almost bald, now I think ChatGPT is coming to replace. But another, and I think it was Bassel that mentioned, is prompt engineering. And prompt engineers is coming up quite rapidly as one of those kind of new jobs that didn't exist, or new skills that people didn't know about. So tell me, and we can start with Carla this time. Carla, if you can tell us a little bit about the profiles that you needed, or that you need actually to continue growing the organization. You have an education psychology background, and how are you equipping yourselves to be able to be ahead of the pack, especially with shortening times for innovation, right, as we just described?
We are actually really lucky, because before this crazy FIBA, we already had a team that covered the 3 main or core specificities of the business. We had the devs, we had the product, and we had a bunch of pedagogy, psychologists, social content. So we all worked together. Of course, we had to specialize, and prompt engineering, it's been the main, but we already had an expert in that, and we didn't even know. So that helps a lot. So we didn't have to look for it, because actually it's not that known. So yeah, we have been lucky, but our team will have to grow, and we'll have to find new roles and new models so we can cover more about that. I don't know if I answered your question.
Bassel, yeah, you did. Bassel, maybe if you can follow on the question by, I don't think everyone might know about prompt engineering. I think a good group of people in the call today might, but if you can describe in your own words what you are doing with prompt engineering and the skills that required.
So just to touch up on some hires or some people that we have to also work with. So as Ben mentioned, you have to have an understanding of how the models work, how are they trained, how do they understand the information, and based on that, you can do optimize it for your use case. So it's very crucial to understand the underlying technology, not just see what's out there. You have to understand how it understands the context, what are transformers, how does it know what to say, based on what. So by knowing this, you would be able to have a prompt. So you can have a specific text that you write to this model to get it to give you the response that you need. So some of the prompts out there, for example, act as an AI tutor or as an interviewer. You know this knowledge, you can answer this, so you can put some constraints, you can put some things that they can focus on, you can give them some sort of rules that they have to follow. So this is when it comes to prompt engineering, controlling this model to work for your use case in the way that you need it to do.
Perfect.
I don't know if you guys agree with this, but what I found was in the early days, back in the dawn of this technology, last year, the prompt engineering was a lot of what we were doing, and it was trying to work out how do you get this model can produce human-like language, but how do we get it to constrain it? And we spent a lot of time writing prompts saying the member is a waiter in a restaurant it's friendly, it uses simple language that a 5-year-old could understand, trying to do things like this to try and constrain it and nurture it in the right direction. But and then once we got quite good at that, we got good at asking GPT-3 to generate the prompts itself. And once we sort of set up the architecture so that we were putting an input and then asking GPT-3 to generate something, then GPT-3 to check what it was doing, in this kind of circular checking process. And then we found more different people could be good at writing the prompts when those constraints were on the system. Then ChatGPT came out, and ChatGPT was just better at writing the prompts than our system. So then we took ChatGPT and put and structured that in an architecture like our system, and find that we can get even better results. So it's like, I think that part of me thinks that this problem of prompt engineering was a really big deal a year ago, and the better and better the models get, and the more trained they get, and the more time you spend fine-tuning the model, the kind of less important prompt engineering becomes, and the more important architecture and fine-tuning becomes. That's been our experience so far, but I'll be really interested to hear from either of you.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I need to ask these two next questions. I think it's a recurrent topic in all the different forums and kind of projects that we are involved. One is connected, and you've touched on it already, which is around correctness, right? Making sure that the data that gets produced is, it's correct, and it's not hurting anyone's feelings. Put it that way. That's number one. The second one is about ethical considerations, how the models are being trained, how this new content generated by generative AI needs to be labeled or disclaimed as it's being used. And probably there is a set of additional questions on the ethical front and the correctness that we could be asking. But start with correctness, and Ben, I can pick on you. You mentioned that for language learning, obviously, if you are just mocking a conversation, the fact that the AI bot doesn't know that the car cannot be 500 euros, it's not relevant, right? What's important is the interaction.
Exactly, because you're kind of going through a process, and in fact, it can lead to humor as well. I guess the other angle, a place where I mentioned that the bot can correct your grammar at this point. So at the moment, it corrects your grammar. Something that we're testing, which we will put in because it definitely works very well, but is something where we need to be conscious of this accuracy, is in grammar explanations. So at the moment it corrects it, but if we can say, like, why was that wrong? What was the mistake there? It's pretty good at telling you that, but we do need to work a little bit harder, because at the point at which Memrise starts saying just fictitious grammar explanations, well, that kind of is a problem. If we just tell an early learner something that just patently isn't true, that's a problem. It's something that isn't, actually, I think we can get around relatively easily, but I think it's at those points where you've crossed the line from the educational experience coming from discourse and the process of trying out ideas, discussing ideas, moving them around between people, and goes to, I am asking it to impart correct information. Well, now it needs to be correct. But I think my argument is that that's actually a relatively small portion of really effective educational experiences. The amount of time, if you can just look it up on Google, that's not really the heart of what the educational experience is. And I think what's really exciting about LLMs is this huge new dimension they open up that we haven't even considered before, because it's been so obviously impossible. You've needed a teacher, you need a human to discuss it with you, but you don't need a human to discuss it with you anymore. You can have that discussion and try and work out, is that true or is that not? I don't know. I can try and argue it around, see if I can persuade it. We can create those experiences without the need for an actual human there.
Brilliant. I think I'm going to move on to the next question and pop it for Bassel or Carla. There's different trains of thought here. Some big education districts in the US are kind of forbidding the usage of ChatGPT, and they've made headlines. Also, IB, International Baccalaureate, has come out and actually very proactively suggested that ChatGPT should be allowed, for kind of the assessment and the learning progress for IB. So here is just two confronting kind of trains of thought. Also, I think there is one of the very first research activities that have come out of the US where they actually surveyed 2,000 teachers. 40% of them claim to use ChatGPT at least once a week. 40%, which in my opinion, once a week, it's a pretty high number. So a lot of the attention is going on how, learners and people that need to get certified are using ChatGPT, but we're already using educators and faculty and teachers, using this technology on their favor, and no surprise here. For me, the question is, and maybe Carla, you're best suited to address this one. If already teachers are using the help of ChatGPT to create lesson plans, I'm assuming, and to create kind of probably interventions and additional content, are we entering a new world where genuine content creation value starts to go to zero, since everyone can have a healthy interaction with the bot and create a healthy amount of content? What's your opinion on that, Carla?
It's sure a paradigm shift, and it will depend on how all of us adapt ourselves to this pretty new AI reality. What I mean is that ChatGPT 3 is another tool for the content providers and may lead to an increase the quality standards. So it won't depend on the content that it used to be, but in which quality we ask to the providers now.
I think also one thing when it comes to like disclaiming the content, when it comes from ChatGPT, like this is where we have to rethink about the like assessment approach. So do we really like just assess them on the end product, or do we have to understand the journey that they went to? So for us, for example, the conversation that they did, the questions that they asked, what did they explore, to assess them based on that, or is it just for the essay that they wrote or the question that they answered? So I think this is good, because I personally sensed that when I was studying, and I was sometimes frustrated when I submit something and I put a lot of work into that, and then I wouldn't get like a good grade. So I believe the current assessment that we have should change, and ChatGPT came out there and showed that you have to change it, otherwise you'll be incorrectly assessing the learners.
Yeah, actually, the discussions. Sorry, Ben. The discussions about using AI in education have already started, and we are testing Koanly in different fields such as primary schools, university, and big corporations, and not everything works for everybody. We don't know yet what range of age should be appropriate, which are the best practices, when to use it, what kind of abilities the student will have to achieve before they can use it. So that's going to be a big discussion.
Yeah, I think just back to language learning assessment, you've got really, at the moment, you've got this very well-known unhelpful situation where you can pass an exam. I got an A in my French GCSE. I'm terrible at French. I can't hold a conversation in it. And yet ChatGPT can assess, the Membot can assess whether I'm talking French well, in a much more nuanced way. And I think in the past, we had to rely on exams and sort of look for things like grammatical accuracy, which actually aren't very good proxies for, can I make my message understood? These models are very, very much better at assessing that in a really reliable and scalable way, which is a really cool new thing, which I think the education world kind of has to respond to. And I think there was a question just about this, Pablo, from LearnCube saying, do you think it'll take as long purely for generating content, language content for teachers? So hi, LearnCube, nice to see you guys. I think that your tutors in LearnCube should be using ChatGPT to generate content right now. I mean, I think they can just do it straight off the bat. If you're a tutor creating content for people to enjoy, you should be doing it straight in a lesson right now. And I think playing with ChatGPT in language lessons, if you've got a tutor there, it can be a very fun and enjoyable and low stress activity. So I think you can get out of the box.
Should they disclaim it, Ben?
Sorry?
Should they disclaim it as they put in kind of the lesson plans or whatever? So they disclaim that the content was generated by.
Actually, I'm more thinking as an activity to do inside a lesson. I think you do it together.
Oh, I see.
You try inputting to it, see what it brings back. I think that creative interaction with the language is precisely what makes it.
Actually, some schools, they are already doing it and analyzing the text, and all of us do summarize, and let's see which one it's from ChatGPT. So they are doing it straight away now.
Even also, from assessment perspective. Sorry, Bassel, please.
So there's also like tools that are emerging right now, like Zero GPT, for example, that is able to analyze if this text is creating using ChatGPT. So this can also help. But also to touch upon what you said, like to discredit the content, I think it's also like I should get credit for writing the prompt, and then ChatGPT should get credit for giving the content. So it's a collaborative work between me as the prompt that I gave to ChatGPT and the content that I got out there. It's not just ChatGPT having all the content, giving it to me. So I did play a role in that.
Right. Actually, that's a really. I see LearnCube have just replied saying I get different responses on whether you can rely on it. To be clear, you can't just rely on it as a black box, that it's a perfect thing that you ask it questions and it always produces great content. Definitely not. But and so when I see some people posting on Twitter where they've said, God, ChatGPT can't even do this, and they've asked it a question and it's given a wrong answer, they've misunderstood what is happening, that or what the tool is there for. It's not that every time it will produce something back that's completely reliable. You've got to try and play the instrument. It's like me picking up my guitar and going, look, it's broken, it doesn't make a song. It's like, yeah, you've got to play it right. So yes, my guitar won't reliably make music, and yes, ChatGPT won't 100% reliably give you great content, but you can definitely use it to make great content.
Actually,
definitely, I think Sorry, Carla.
No, go for it.
No, I continue interrupting. I'm a terrible host, apparently. Please.
No, that's actually what we try to do, controlling over the contents. So instead of providing a random answer that sometimes ChatGPT can give you, Koanly gives you the correct answer based on your own contents. So instead of going through the whole internet, it goes just straight away to your contents. So then the question or the answer might be the one that you were looking for.
Perfect. I think before we get in a second with some of the kind of Q&A from the rest, there was two more things I wanted to get your views on, and I think it's aligned with some of what people are asking on the chat already. I think we could use probably another full hour answering all those questions. I think I'll make a brief parenthesis on the assessment side. I think, Bassel, you mentioned about kind of Zero GPT, and even OpenAI came out with an API, AI text analyzer, but none of these are at the moment extremely reliable, even at classifying the likelihood of a content being AI generated or not. So on the assessment side, we'll actually be posting, it's a core part of what we spend a lot of time at EDT, some kind of guidelines and best practices shortly. But the bottom line is that there is hardly going to be just one evidence that you can have if you want to find out who is using generative AI to provide an answer. You're going to need to figure out more indicators. That's not just the output, right? How quickly it was created, a number of other things, and as well, from an assessment perspective, Ben, I couldn't agree more with your comment before. It's like we need to figure out a new way of assessing skills and not, just deploying standardized testing for all, right? That the way we have done over the last 100 years. So it's around validating, can Ben speak French or Mandarin, which I think he can, or at least a little bit. But not whether he can memorize a set of questions and provide them in a specific essay or assessment. To me, I think looking at the daily news on ChatGPT and moving on to one of the last questions, Salesforce just announced a GPT version, Slack as well, which is part of Salesforce. Notion, a very well-known kind of note-taking app, also has GPT embedded. So maybe this, Bassel, more connected to you, since you kind of play with a few of these kind of social networks. How do you plan to be ahead of competition, right? The times for innovation to implement, we're seeing that are getting shorter. So how do you plan to stay different with your products in the next 12, 24 months?
So Pablo, actually, this is a very good question. And we get like a question, like, why wouldn't we use like ChatGPT? Why would we use eFlow, for example? So the difference here is the data that you provide, the constraints that you put, fine-tuning. There's a lot of things that go into the model to optimize it for your approach. So for example, ChatGPT is created as a general AI model that can answer different questions, but it might give you like average answers because it's trained on a very large amount of data, and it's not specialized into like the education field. So what we have different is we're making it more specialized. So we're building on top of it to make sure that it's more specialized into the education, and even having it specialized in different fields. So when you're learning, you're getting the best content out there, like close to the best content out there, and we're making sure that it's factual responses. Like there's a lot of things that go into that. Also, actually, we have an intermediate model that plays a role to make sure that this is also what we need. So it's not just integrating with the API, which is very easy for any developer. It's customizing it for your own use case. So Ben has a separate use case that maybe if I try to learn like eFlow on Ben's bot, won't be able to get the results that I need. And if he uses our bot for language learning, wouldn't give the results that he has, because his is specialized for language learning, ours is specialized for educational conversations. So this is mostly the difference.
So basically kind of deep specialization in your context, in your use case. Okay. Ben, Carla, what about you? How do you plan to stay ahead of competitors claiming to do something similar?
Carla, you go first.
Actually, 6 months ago, we weren't able to do what we are doing now. So we just know what we don't know anything. So what we do now know is that everything is moving really fast, and the use of AI in EdTech has a huge potential. So we have to be attentive to all the new features and have a clean product so we can integrate it. But we don't really know how it's going to be.
Right. So I think for us, we were first to market with a kind of AI language tutor, language partner product. But I got to believe that Duolingo are going to come out with something very soon. Quizlet have already put out something kind of along the same lines. And this is all building on ChatGPT, which is a paid product, but is the kind of leader at the moment. But you've got a whole load of open source versions that are catching up really quickly. You've got a whole load of other models that are breaking onto the next frontier. You've got Google have got 4 internal models that they're waiting to release. So we've got I believe that the basic fundamental part of these LLMs is becoming commoditized very, very quickly. What isn't becoming commoditized is the user experience side of it. How you build something that actually works for people. So this is part of what Bassel is saying about specialized to particular use cases. And I think that happens in 2 ways. One is the fine tuning to particular sets of information. I think that's going to become really, really important, that knowing a particular domain really, really well and being able to respond to that. And then the other is how it plugs into a richer ecosystem. So at Memrise, my first slide there, learn, immerse, communicate. Now, those are 3 parts of the Memrise product. Learn is where you learn words and phrases. Immerse is where we filter videos from YouTube, from TikTok, from everywhere, so that you can watch videos that just use the words and phrases that you know, and maybe 10% more, and then communicate. Is this piece where you can communicate with a bot? But the key is that if you're communicating with the bot, when you're having the conversation, you don't know what to say, you're getting a hint, you can add those words to your words to learn. Then once you've learned them, you can see them being used in a film. It's that integration that makes it super powerful and means that I'm not worried by Duolingo pulling out something similar, because their entire product is structured around a course rather than structured around each individual learners. It's a syllabus-centric learning rather than a user-centric learning. And I think that we will see with these, in the old days, you kind of had to be syllabus-centric because you needed to think everything through logically and organize it all up front. But what these LLMs have done for us is mean that we can be much more intelligent in the moment and be much more adaptive. And I think we'll see a lot more moving towards these user-centric learning models rather than syllabus-centric learning models. And I think that's where we'll get real, within education, where we'll get real moats around the business, because that's something that's very hard for legacy players to adjust to.
Brilliant. Thanks for those 3 answers. I think the last 2 questions, and I'm trying to kind of get them together from feedback from the chat. One is more kind of personal question on my end. The other one, I think, coming from the chat. How about, do you have early proof of learning efficacy? Because there is in certain groups, especially on the policy making side, often it's like, we thought that back on the day, just putting laptops in the classroom was going to make the classrooms more effective, and with the right type of experience and content is just a piece of hardware and provides certain access. Is there a risk that kind of this AI is gonna be a flood of new products and new interactions, but actually have little output into kind of learning outcomes? That's one question, and I'm making this difficult by combining 2 questions. What do you think generative AI is working against or in favor of the digital divide that already exists in between, well-resourced countries or even schools or districts or families and less resourced environments, the global south and other players? So basically learning outcomes and digital divide. Floor is yours.
So Pablo, when it comes to AI, it should be more used to solve a problem. So now we see a lot of people trying to integrate ChatGPT because it's cool into their learning platform. But you have to think about it first. What's the approach that I want? So for us, the learning approach that we believe is more natural and conversational. And this is why we're using AI and ChatGPT to be able to do that. If you just have a regular platform, you just want to add ChatGPT to make it smarter, that might be more as a gimmick and wouldn't really help in the learning efficacy and approach. So I would say that we have to look first at what's the core of the learning approach that we have. How can AI help with that and focus on that instead of just adding something that is cool? So this is when it comes to integrating. When it comes to digital divide, I'm so interested to talk about this because actually how we started is we started when COVID was there, and part of our or most of our learners when we started was from NGOs that are dealing with underserved communities and refugees, and the only access that they had was WhatsApp. So we were able to introduce this learning to them and have them learn while they have very low resources. So this is also something that helps to decrease the gap when it comes to the digital divide, getting them to get very good content, although they don't have the resources for that.
Or a better experience without the need to have a tutor or a person just in front of them.
Exactly.
We are on top of the hour, and I don't want to prevent Carla and Ben from answering. So I'm just going to ask you to be extra short if you can on your answers.
Carla, do you want to go first?
No, I was just saying that, for us, it's an approach that every student can have its own adaptation, like nothing related to their learning process. So it's not about if you have the resources or not, but is either you have the resources or not. Is it adapted to yourself, or you are in a classroom and you are not understanding anything at all? Then let's adapt the tool so it can be explained to you and to me and to everybody at its own pace. Yeah, and you go, Ben.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the efficacy, like no scientific studies have been set out on this yet, 'cause it's so new. But the way we think about it at Memrise is that the proven piece, which is proven by decades and decades of research into second language acquisition, is that you need to practice speaking in a safe environment in order to get good at speaking in another language. That's really incontrovertible, the evidence for that. So the question then becomes, is talking with a bot a way of practicing talking? Well, on one level, self-evidently, yes, it is, because you're having a conversation. And in fact, you aren't terribly aware that it isn't a human because it's talking in such a human-like way. So in a way, this is just doing exactly what the research already shows is effective. One more thing, I see Halima in the chat talking about the assessment, the rigorous assessment of whether, rigorous studies into whether ChatGPT can be good at assessment. I 100% agree. Those haven't happened yet. I think they need to happen. My intuition is that ChatGPT and other LLMs will be very good at assessment. Before that's rolled out and replaces the TOEFL exam, clearly there needs to be a lot of studies. But I think I got to believe that if you're running the TOEFL exam, you're pretty scared right now. And then on the other side, the digital divide, actually, as I said at the top of this, I think we actually flatten out the digital divide a lot because people currently don't have access to learning English because of the cost divide in getting access to English native speakers. And this is a way to go against that. There is still that digital divide there as well, which we don't address, but I think that the addressing of that huge cost inequality that puts this kind of glass ceiling in between much of the world, much of the developing world and learning English, I think that this technology just breaks through that.
Brilliant. So I'm staying with, and apologies, we're going 3 minutes over the time. We're promised we're wrapping up in 60 seconds. I'm taking quite a few kind of highlights from what you guys described in terms of, some of the importance of the interoperability in between these tools and systems, about the shortening time to bring these solutions to market. So if someone out there is thinking on, I'm going to release my generative AI in education solution for Q4 or Q1 next year, probably they are way late. So probably you need to accelerate. Definitely around the efficacy will be interesting to see, not only on the assessment side and a number of other things. And Carla was referring to the extreme adaptability, basically having personalized interventions for every single learner of anything, be in a language, be in the lesson, be in TOEFL, whatever that might be, right? Brilliant. I cannot thank you enough. I wanted to, if anyone that has been following these or seeing the recording has been inspired by these three phenomenal individuals and great initiatives, please feel free to reach out to them. I wanted to highlight briefly a little bit of the work that we do in terms of technology and product and some of the partners that we operate with. So that you are trying to save cost on your kind of cloud deal, or get your product into a new market, obviously education product into a new market, or thinking about assessment technology, or implementing your next kind of AI initiative, not necessarily only generative AI, please feel free to reach out to us. And once again, thank you all. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Bassel. It's been a phenomenal experience being this hour and a little bit with the three of you. I wonder if we should already make a date for next year and see how this thing has changed tremendously over the next course of 12 months. It might be fun. So maybe I'll challenge you to that early next year, and we get on the phone again. Thanks again, and thanks everyone for joining. See you all very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.